Well, thanks very much, George, and thanks to Cherie as well for sharing your real-world stories about the impact that the government's approach to industrial relations and casualisation is having on the ground to real people. I also want to thank Cameron for his welcome to country and join with him in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet tonight and pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I want to thank our great National President, Wayne Swan, who saw us through the global financial crisis and has been a mate of mine now at party forums well before both of us were in Parliament now for a number of decades, and it's fantastic to be working with Wayne towards the election of the next Labor government. I thank you for your contribution, Wayne. Look, it is a great pleasure to be back here in the Sunshine State, and even better, to be able to speak to this audience of hard-working Queenslanders. In particular, I want to acknowledge the heroes of the coronavirus pandemic, the proud Australians whose work kept our country going and all of us safe. Nurses, aged care workers, cleaners, supermarket workers, delivery drivers, contact tracers, teachers, early childhood educators. Many of you work in industries that are not properly valued and rewarded. Despite this, your sacrifice, your selflessness, and your care for your fellow Australians continues to shield us from the horror the pandemic has wrought in the nations across Europe and the United States. Thank you for everything you have done. What a pity that Scott Morrison doesn't feel this sense of gratitude, because instead of rewarding you, Mr Morrison is cynically using the pandemic to launch a full frontal assault on your pay, your conditions and your job security. At the same time, he has been doing nothing to stop the creeping expansion of insecure work. Indeed, fewer Australians can access the basic entitlements and protections that earlier generations took for granted. Nearly a third of Australian workers are in arrangements with unpredictable, fluctuating pay and hours. They endure for few of the protections such as sick and holiday leave or superannuation. And on top of that, the Morrison government is clearly planning to repeal a legislated rise in employer superannuation contributions from 9.5% of your wages to 12%. They've been trying to justify this by telling you that you'll have enough super to retire on, provided you run down your savings, sell your home, and have nothing left if unexpected events befall you. For this Prime Minister, the concept of job security for working families is as fair dinkum as when he told Malcolm Turnbull that his job was secure. And we all know how that worked out. This is something that Mr Morrison simply does not get. For millions of Australians, the essential prerequisite to raising a family, buying a home and building a future is a good, secure job and enough super to retire comfortably. Not being forced into a casual job, but good permanent work that comes with protections such as sick leave, family leave, annual leave and penalty rates. Scott Morrison doesn't get this, but I do. And today I want to talk about the first 8 elements of Labor's Secure Australian Jobs Plan. Job security, explicitly inserted into the Fair Work Act. Rights for gig economy workers through the Fair Work Commission. Consultation on portable entitlements for workers in insecure industries. Casual work properly defined in law. A crackdown on cowboy labour hire firms to guarantee a pretty simple principle: same job, same pay. A cap on back-to-back short-term contracts for the same role. More secure public sector jobs by ending inappropriate temporary contracts. And government contracts to companies and organisations that offer secure work for their employees. Today, I have a very clear message for the working people of Australia. Labor is on your side. Labor's Secure Australian Jobs Plan will give you a better deal: job security, better pay, a fairer system. A government I lead will always respect the central importance of successful businesses as job creators. Governments create the environment that enables business to prosper and create new jobs. This requires a partnership between government, business and unions. Good employers give their workers security and a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. In return, good workers give their employer loyalty, understanding that their jobs are linked to the viability of their employer's business. Working together. That's the way to achieve growth and to achieve prosperity. The best governments in our history have understood the need for a compact between business and their workers to advance their mutual interests. The Labor governments of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating are a prime example. Collaboration between workers, employers and government of the day delivered genuine enterprise bargaining and the conditions that created 30 years of continuous economic growth. Compare that to Scott Morrison and his colleagues. Now, during their 8 years in office, they have been steadily undermining this compact. They want to reduce workers' security to the point whereby bad employers are unfairly favoured, which then places competitive cost pressures on good employers. They want to squeeze workers because that's easier than promoting fairness. It's counterproductive, it's short-sighted and it is wrong. Now, Scott Morrison and Christian Porter revealed their true intention on the future of Australian workplaces in the final week of Parliament last year. After 8 years of deliberately suppressing wages, cutting penalty rates and attacking trade unions, the government is now using the pandemic as cover to cut pay and make work even less secure. Their motives are as blatant as they are vicious. When John Howard abolished unfair dismissal protections, workers were threatened with the sack if they didn't cop cuts to pay. Now, Scott Morrison wants to abolish the Better Off Overall test. The hint's there in the name. And he hopes that people won't notice that it's a plan so that workers can't be better off. Once again, Scott Morrison is all smirk and mirrors. We are seeing businesses like Hello World, should be familiar to the LNP government, not the first time they've been mentioned in dispatches in recent years, they are pressuring their workers to accept a pay cut. Under my leadership, Labor has been constructive. During the pandemic, we have not opposed government measures for the sake of it, even when we have had justifiable concerns. But let's be very, very clear. The Labor Party will never support any legislation that undermines the pay, conditions and security of Australian workers. Full stop, end of story. We are on the side of working families, and we will always stand up for your rights to secure jobs, fair pay and safe workplaces. We understand the country deserves better than a choice between a mediocre status quo and an even worse future. Genuine reform is needed to lift productivity and pay, to boost cooperation and competitiveness. But respectful collaboration between workers and business requires balance, and only a Labor government can restore that balance. As I said when I became Labor leader, my focus is on solutions, not arguments. So Labor is not just going to oppose Scott Morrison's assault on the rights of working people, we're offering a better deal. The difference between Labor and the Conservatives is that Labor believes the economy should serve people, not the other way around. First, we have a plan to protect your rights in the modern workplace. Labor has always stood up for the independent umpire, the Fair Work Commission, to resolve workplace disputes and ensure workplace protections are fair for workers and that they are enforced. But when the Fair Work Act was written, more than a decade ago now, few could have predicted the extraordinary growth that we've seen in the different forms of insecure work. To resolve this, we will legislate job security as a key objective of the Fair Work Act. This will require the Fair Work Commission to bring a sharp focus to job security when making decisions about your rights at work. In addition, we will legislate to ensure that more Australian workers have access to employee protections and entitlements currently denied to them by the fact that there's an outdated definition of what an employee is that doesn't recognise the changes that have occurred in commerce. We'll do this by extending the powers of the Fair Work Commission to include employee-like forms of work, allowing the Commission to make orders for minimum standards for new forms of work. Now, the most obvious example of what we are talking about here is, of course, the gig or on-demand economy, an ever-increasing and entrenched part of our daily lives. Technology underpinning on-demand services has transformed the way that certain services are delivered for consumers. It's all about convenience, and we're certainly not against that. Anyone who has ordered food through Deliveroo, taken a trip on Uber, or used Airtasker knows that. But beneath the surface, we are seeing a depressingly familiar picture. Workers scrambling for insecure jobs and agreeing to below minimum wage rates to perform work that's paid by the piece. For these big global firms, there's a supply of workers on demand, yet the employment relationship is so easy to manage. But in recent times, we've seen the terrible consequences of a largely unregulated industry that puts unacceptable pressure on gig workers to meet the demands of an algorithm. 5 deaths on our roads over just 3 months. It's not on. Because of the way the gig economy is being structured, workers are being denied basic rights such as award benefits, superannuation, the right to collectively bargain and access to unfair dismissal protections. Take Diego, a food delivery driver. He was sacked for being late, but never once was told that he wasn't delivering fast enough. He wasn't given a chance to improve, yet he had no recourse because he was a gig worker. Or Rosa, who hit a car door while delivering food on her bike. Without sick leave, she had to return to work too soon, and after her injury, she wasn't able to work in the same capacity. And then she was sacked because her injury was allegedly causing her to cycle too slowly. Rosa had no recourse, no legal protections. The problem here is clear enough. While technology has transformed the patterns of commerce and brought benefits, the LNP government simply hasn't kept up with industrial relations changes, with that rapid change. In their inaction, they have favoured employers over employees, when their responsibility is actually to maintain a system that respects the interests of both. Labor will ensure the independent umpire has the capacity to inquire into all forms of work and determine what rights and obligations should apply. We will restore the Fair Work Commission to the centre of our workplace relations system, and we will also do through the abolition of the discredited and politicised Registered Organisations Commission and the Australian Building and Construction Commission. Now, one of the lessons that Australia learned last year was that insecure work doesn't just stop workers getting ahead. It can put their health and the health of those around them at risk. And amid the darkest days of the pandemic, one of the most confronting revelations was how many workers, casuals, contractors, gig workers, had no right at all to paid sick leave. For too many Australians, they had to choose between supporting their own family or playing it safe for the community. And I was very pleased to see that the Victorian Labor government of Daniel Andrews took the lead on paid sick leave for those in insecure work. My colleagues and I see this work as a valuable first step. And right here in Queensland, the Labor government of Anastasia Palaszczuk's portable long service leave scheme for social and community service workers, campaigned for by union members in this room tonight, came into effect on the 1st of January. It's time for a national approach, and that's why a Labor government that I lead will consult with state and territory governments, unions and industry to develop, where it is practical, portable entitlements for annual leave, sick leave and long service leave for Australians in insecure work. Our economy is evolving, and workplace laws must evolve with it. Unless they do, we will see a further rise in inequality. This undermines our social cohesion. This is about supporting innovation and change in the economy while looking after those workers whose sacrifices make that creativity and dynamism possible. This would be life-changing for Australians like Rena, a 53-year-old disability support worker in Canberra. She has worked for a decade in the community sector, mostly within the NDIS, and has multiple relevant qualifications. Yet Rena has to work 2 casual jobs to provide for herself. She has no sick leave, she has no annual leave. This is simply not fair. But thanks to the ACT Labor government's portable long service leave scheme, Rena now has access to long service leave. We want to find a way to recognise Rena's hard and committed work by extending this to annual and sick leave. 1 in every 4 workers in Australia is now a casual employee. This is even higher in some industries such as hospitality. Hospitality is the main job for some 800,000 Australians. 80% of them are casuals. As you and I know, the insecurity of this work has real-life impact. A Hospo Voice survey of some 4,000 workers that was conducted last year found the following facts were there when the pandemic hit. Half didn't have enough savings to cover at least 1 month's basic expenses. Half. Over 1/3 had to borrow money from friends or family. 1/3 were forced to access their super early. The same number fell behind with their bills. And some went without essentials and even had to access food bank or charity just to get by. Those are the cold, hard, human consequences of insecure work. Real people enduring real hardship. We need real solutions to solve it. We know that at the onset of the pandemic, workers in casual jobs lost their employment 8 times faster than those in permanent jobs. And yet, nearly 1 million casual workers were left behind by the Morrison government when it left them out of the wage subsidy scheme JobKeeper. Survival of the fittest is the LNP's core value. These workers were just left behind. Under Labor, they won't be. And I say to them, I'm on your side. Now, of course, there are Australians who prefer the option of casual work for lifestyle or for a range of other reasons, and that's a good thing. I worked as a casual at Macca's, Grace Brothers, Pancakes on the Rocks, the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift on a Saturday night. The penalty race made a difference. The problem arises when the definition of casual is used and abused to deprive people of pay, leave entitlements and job security. Flexibility must come with security, not at the expense of it. Flexibility must benefit workers as well as employers. Now, last year, the Federal Court upheld the long-standing common law meaning of casual employment in favour of a Queensland coal mine worker. That is, the absence of a firm, ongoing commitment to work. Now, our federal government joined the court case on the side of the employer against that judgment. And now that that has failed, they're trying to undo the court's ruling through their omnibus IR bill. Under a Labor government that I lead, we will legislate to create a fair test to determine when a worker can be classified as a casual. Now, the next element of Labor's plan can be summarised in one simple phrase. Same job, same pay. Pretty hard to oppose, really. A Labor government will ensure that workers employed through labour hire companies receive at least the same pay as workers who are employed directly. Here in Queensland, I've heard from coal miners Simon and Ron. They work side by side in the Bowen Basin. Simon works a continuous roster with paid sick leave and annual leave. He gets penalty rates when he's on night shift. Ron works the same roster but gets none of that and is paid 20% less. How come? Simon's directly employed, Ron is employed by labour hire. Now, Simon has explained it this way, to quote him: Ronnie works the same hours that I work, does the same job that I do, has the same responsibilities that I do. I'd like my multinational coal company to employ Ron directly as they employ me. That would be fair. Simon's right. And of course, it's not just the mining industry. It is all too common for casual and labour hire workers to be paid lower minimum hourly rates than permanent employees for the same task. A 2018 ACTU study based on ABS data found that 1 in 3 casual employees said they didn't receive casual loading. As I said, there is a very simple principle to apply here. If you work the same job, you should get the same pay. A Labor government will write that principle into our national law. We will also limit the number of consecutive fixed-term contracts an employer can offer for the same role. Fixed-term contracts have a valid part to play in modern workplaces, especially for projects on a clear timetable or when used to cover for someone on parental leave. What's not right, though, is when employees are part of an endless treadmill of fixed-term contracts by employers who want to avoid giving them permanent status. That lack of permanent status prevents people from basic, important things like securing a home loan, even if they've been with their employer for many years. There is a simple fix. We will legislate for fixed-term contract limits for the same role of 24 months or no more than 2 consecutive contracts, whatever comes first. In future, once that limit is reached, the employer will be required to offer a permanent position, either part-time or full-time. It's just fair. And when it comes to fairness in the workplace, the Commonwealth has a responsibility to lead by example. But if you want an idea of what Mr Morrison has in mind for Australian workers, have a look at how the government treats its own employees in the public service. We will call time on the relentless outsourcing, offshoring and short-term contracting that has undercut the capacity of departments to do their job and undermined the frontline services that Australians rely on. It wastes large amounts of taxpayers' money, as well as being unfair for workers. We will conduct an audit of employment within the Australian public service and, as a model employer, take steps to create more secure employment where temporary forms of work are being used inappropriately. Now, a Department of Veterans Affairs labour hire worker recently told her union the following, and I quote her: "I have been a casual for 5 years and now I have to reapply for my job because the company that employs me has lost its contract with DVA. If I don't get employed, I'll have no redundancy pay or any leave paid out. If the new contractor employs me, then it just shows I'm not a casual." This sort of thing is happening to more of us all of the time. We are doing permanent work and should have secure jobs. She is right. Labor will ensure also that when the Commonwealth Government purchases goods and services, it upholds these same values by supporting bids from companies and organisations that are themselves providers of good, secure jobs. We will set a standard, and we will uphold that standard in all of our dealings. And finally, let me make this clear and unambiguous statement. Labor will fight to defend the increase in the super guarantee to 12%. It is legislated. It is needed. People deserve it. If Scott Morrison wants to try to stop it and force you into hardship in your retirement, he's in for one hell of a fight from our entire movement. They promised before the 2013 election that they wouldn't touch super. They broke that promise. They did the same in 2016, and now they're heading to do the same in 2019. They just don't like the idea that workers should be comfortable in their retirement. But superannuation is designed to give people the security that they deserve in that retirement. The next federal election will be a contest between two very different visions for the future of Australia. A battle for the things which matter most to the Labor Party I lead and to millions of Australians. Jobs. Good, secure jobs. Today's plan builds on my budget reply, in which I set out measures to create jobs and a future made in Australia. Today's plan speaks to 130 proud years of consistent Labor values and, in my own lifetime, as an advocate for working people. But above all, today's plan is about our future. It's about the Australia that we want to emerge from the chaos and the crisis of last year. The task of national reconstruction must recognise and ensure that we reward the millions of people whose hard work drives the success and prosperity of our country and who got us through that difficult year of 2020. It must deliver a greater sense of security for those who need it most. And it must deliver a deeper level of confidence for families looking to their place in a rapidly changing economy. Australian families deserve greater security in the workplace. And as I said earlier, I understand without successful businesses, we don't get jobs growth. And I'm impressed by the flexibility and innovation shown by Australian businesses as they have adjusted to technological change. But the current government has failed to deliver on its responsibility to ensure that workplace laws have evolved at the same pace as changes in the patterns of commerce. These laws can be adjusted in ways that benefit both employers and employees, but it is only a Labor government that can make those adjustments to restore the balance of fairness. And that is because we understand deep in our core the nature of the compact between workers and employees. We understand that it's a two-way street, not one in which the power imbalance entrenches inequality and bad outcomes. If the interests of both sides are recognised, they can move forward together to pursue their mutual interests of security and prosperity. Workers and their employers do have that common interest. Now, we have a fight ahead of us in the Parliament, a fierce contest to defeat the worst workplace changes in Howard's work choices. But we defeated them then. They were soundly rejected by the Australian people more than a decade ago. And we can defeat these changes. But that's not enough. Resistance to bad change is the job of Labor oppositions. Finding solutions to the big challenges and then implementing them is the mission of Labor governments. It's why I want to be the Prime Minister. To create good, secure jobs, to protect and advance fair pay and decent conditions, to make sure the laws of this country reward the efforts and serve the interests of the Australian people who turn up day in, day out, motivated by an aspiration to build a better life for themselves, their families, their communities and indeed their nation. I say to Australian workers, I'm on your side. No one left behind, no one held back. That's the Labor way. Thanks very much. Fantastic.